Today, we're diving into something that shapes our world in ways we barely notice: hidden prejudice. And our guide for this is the incredible work of Dr. Jennifer L. Eberhardt, whose research really pulls back the curtain on the unconscious biases that affect what we see, what we think, and ultimately, what we do.
So let's just start with this sentence right here. I hope he doesn't rob the plane. Just imagine hearing that said out loud on a flight. Who do you think said something like that? And maybe more importantly, why?
Well, get this. The person who said it was 5 years old, a little kid. And that's really where our story begins, because it shows us something fascinating and kind of scary about how bias can take root without any hatred or any intention to cause harm at all. Okay, so picture this. Dr. Eberhardt, who remember is a leading expert on this exact topic, is on a plane with her young son. Her son sees the only other black man on the entire flight walking up the aisle, and he points.
And that's when he says it. I hope he doesn't rob the plane. And he says it sweetly, with this genuine curiosity of a child who's just trying to piece together how the world works. And that innocence, that's what makes this moment so powerful and so revealing.
So that's the big question, right? How on earth does a 5-year-old with zero malice in his heart learn such a powerful and damaging association? Well, it's not magic. It's really about the mechanics of how our brains are wired.
The key idea here is something called implicit bias. Look, these aren't beliefs we consciously choose to have. They're the automatic, unconscious associations our brains make to try and make sense of a really complicated world. They're like mental shortcuts that we don't even know we're taking.
Think about it. Kids are basically little detectives. It's their main job to be expert pattern spotters. They're constantly watching us. They see who we talk to, who we might avoid. They see how different people are shown in movies and on the news, and they just connect the dots? And here's the crucial part. The association between black people and crime is just so widespread in our culture. You see it in the news, in TV shows, in all sorts of societal patterns, that a child can absorb it without anyone ever teaching them to be hateful. It's just in the air they breathe. Okay, so now let's see how this thread pulls through from an innocent comment on a plane to a deadly encounter on a street. Because these mental shortcuts, they don't just stay inside our heads. They have real and sometimes absolutely tragic consequences.
So we go to Tulsa, Oklahoma. A man named Terrence Crutcher's SUV had stalled in the middle of the road. Police show up. He was unarmed and he had his hands in the air. Just moments later, he was shot and killed.
And listen to this. From a police helicopter that was circling above, even before the officers on the ground had really engaged with him, you can hear one of them say, "That looks like a bad dude." The perception of him as a threat was immediate. And this comparison right here, this gets to the absolute heart of the tragedy. Police perceived a giant, dangerous, bad dude who looked like he was on something. The reality? He was a gospel singer, a father, a community college student with textbooks in his car for his first class. That gap, the one between perception and reality, it was fatal.
So what happened in court? Well, the officer who shot him testified that she fired because she feared for her life. The jury acquitted her. And this just goes to show how a subjective feeling of fear, one that's fueled by unconscious bias, can become a successful legal defense.
And look, these are not just a series of isolated, unfortunate incidents. When these individual biases are held by a lot of people inside our institutions, they scale up. They create these massive system-wide patterns that have enormous consequences. A perfect and really stark example is the criminal justice system. The patterns you can see here are impossible to ignore, and they have a huge effect on our society's collective thinking. Okay, so the United States has just over 4% of the world's population, right? A tiny fraction. But we house this number, 22% of the world's entire prison population. Just let that sink in for a second. It's a staggering figure. And this system disproportionately impacts Black Americans. This creates this devastating feedback loop, this vicious cycle. The disparity is so visible it reinforces the stereotype of Black criminality, which in turn fuels the biases that lead to more policing and harsher sentencing in the first place. And hey, this pattern isn't just in the justice system. Landmark studies have shown this over and over when you send out identical resumes where the only difference is a white-sounding name versus a black-sounding name. The first group gets way more callbacks. Bias is literally shaping people's opportunities from the very beginning. So where does all this leave us? What can we possibly do?
Well, Dr. Eberhardt suggests the first step isn't about finding some quick fix. It's about being willing to confront what her son once called a scary monster.
And it is a scary idea because bias isn't some simple character flaw you can just fix. It's actually a fundamental feature of how all our brains work. We are hardwired to categorize, to take shortcuts. It's an efficient way to process the world, but as we've seen, it can be deeply flawed.
But that efficiency comes at a terrible cost. From a child's innocent remark on a plane, to a family losing a father on the side of a road, to the systemic barriers that hold people back. These mental shortcuts build a world of profound inequality.
Dr. Eberhardt's work doesn't really give us easy answers, but it leaves us with a really important challenge. So the question we're left with isn't if we have biases, because we all do, it's part of being human. The real question is, what do we do about them? How can we start to learn to see differently?